So a couple months back, I did a pre-draft NFL playoff prediction video where I went through and I listed off all the teams I felt were ready to make a run at the playoffs in 2020. And if I remember correctly, since it was made before the NFL draft, we didn't even have the schedules for the 2020 NFL season at the time. So it's safe to say that a lot has changed since then. And recently I've seen a ton of requests popping up on that video to remake it and share my new opinions on everything going on in the NFL, what with the additions through the NFL draft and us finally having the schedules for each and every team heading into 2020. And with that in mind, I thought it might be even more fun to do a video centered around the regular season and my prediction for each and every team. But before we get into that, I want to very quickly take a second to mention that only a small percentage of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you do end up enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing for NFL videos. Also, if this video hits 2,000 likes, I will remake the entire NFL playoff predictions video as a continuation off of this video and go through each and every matchup in the playoffs all the way up until the Super Bowl. But with that being said, let's get started. Kicking this video off in the NFC North, I have the Packers going 10-6. And this step back from their previous 13-3 campaign will actually see them lose supremacy of the NFC North. Now, don't get me wrong, Rodgers is an incredible quarterback still, and the Rodgers-Adams-Jones trio is definitely a deadly trio in the league, but I just don't see them winning the NFC North anymore after the decisions they made in this year's NFL draft. Next up, I have the Vikings going 11-5, and with a one-game lead over the Packers, taking the NFC North back in 2020. They added some big pieces in the offseason without really losing anything huge apart from Stephon Diggs, who they ended up replacing with Justin Jefferson out of LSU, who may even make them better than they were with Diggs. I definitely see them taking the NFC North back in 2020. Moving on down the list, I have the Bears flipping the Vikings record, coming in at 5-11. They simply failed to address the key issues that caused their initial step back in 2019, and I feel it's only downhill from here. I hope I'm wrong, but with their schedule, 5-11 is really all I can muster up. And the Lions bottom out in the NFC North, coming in at 4-12. Now they are getting Stafford back, but I still don't feel confident about the Lions heading into this season. I'd love to see the team take a leap in 2020, but I don't have any genuine reason to believe that they will. In the AFC North, I have the Browns going 7-9. The division is likely to return to its very tight competitive form with Big Ben's return and a Steelers defense that could become the best in the league. And with two drastically different seasons we've seen from Baker Mayfield in 2018 and 2019, I'm simply not sure what to expect from him in 2020. Next up, the Ravens come flying in at 14-2, holding on to their control of the AFC North. That is, as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy. That is a big if given his play style, but I'm going to assume that he will and slot the Ravens in at 14-2. Last season was not a fluke. Lamar Jackson is not a running back, and the Ravens will definitely be fun to watch in 2020. Moving on down the list, the Steelers surge back this year, clocking in at 10-6. Simply put, if Mike Tomlin can manage to go 8-8 with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges as his quarterback, Big Ben will definitely help him improve. The Steelers may end up touting the best defense in the league as well in 2020, so Steel City, you have a lot to look forward to. And the Bengals bottom out in the AFC North, coming in at 4-12. Look, I love Joe Burrow. I'm an LSU fan, for God's sakes, but I don't think that he's enough realistically to carry this team. I'm also not sold on Zach Taylor, and ultimately I think this rebuild will take quite some time, and the Bengals are just not ready for anything big in 2020. Heading into the NFC East, I have the Eagles going 10-6. I'm not entirely sold on their wide receivers, but that aside, when healthy, their offensive line is unparalleled, and I'm actually one of the very few people who believes in Carson Wentz. Darius Slay will as well prove to be a key addition to an already solid defense, and with all of that being said, 10-6, my prediction Eagles. Next up, I have the Cowboys sitting pretty at 11-5, edging out the Eagles for NFC East supremacy. The addition of CeeDee Lamb is going to be absolutely huge for this team. They have a solid defense as well, and I think that pattern of the division leaders switching every single year will continue with the 2020 Cowboys taking control. Moving on down the list, I have the Giants clocking in at 3-13. They have somewhat of a rough schedule, facing what I believe are 6 playoff teams, and I simply don't think that their roster is good enough as things stand currently. Maybe I'll be wrong, but this is where I stand currently with the New York Giants. And I have the Redskins bottoming out in the NFC East, coming in at 2-14. They may just have one of the worst rosters in the entire league. I don't feel confident in Dwayne Haskins as of yet, and they have a rough schedule on top of all of that. So barring a miracle, I think the Redskins will be one of the worst teams in 2020. In the AFC East, I have the Patriots going 9-7. They have one of the better defenses in the league even after losing some pieces, and recently acquired Cam Newton, though we don't know what to expect from him, and they may just have one of the worst offensive supporting casts surrounding him in the entire league. So I'm expecting a relative down year in New England in 2020. Next up, I have the Bills breaking the Patriots' 11-year-long streak of winning the AFC East, coming in at 10-6. I think Josh Allen will definitely take a step forward in 2020 with the addition of Stephon Diggs, and with the Bills' lethal defense, I think we can all agree that they're on an upward trajectory heading in to 2020. Moving on down the list, I have the Jets bottoming out at 4-12. They're up against 6 teams who make the playoffs on my list, 2 of which they play twice, and simply put, I don't think that they'll be able to do much in 2020. And I have the Dolphins clocking in at 6-10. They have a really rough schedule early on as they face 5 teams who will make the playoffs on my list in their first 6 games, but I do think that they will be able to piece together a nice streak to finish things out. They have a rough schedule, but I do think that this year will be a great step forward for the team. Heading down to the NFC South, I have the Saints finishing 13-3 for the 3rd season in a row. With key additions such as Emmanuel Sanders and Malcolm Jenkins, their 2 weakest points have seen significant upgrades in the offseason, and they will be a force to be reckoned with in 2020. Next up, I have the Falcons coming in going 9-7. The NFC South only got tougher in the offseason, and with them facing 7 teams who make the playoffs on my list, 2 of which they faced twice, I don't think the Falcons will vie for a playoff spot in 2020. Moving on down the list, I have the Buccaneers clocking in at 10-6. This Arians-Brady union will definitely take some time, as I explained in a video around a month ago, to reach its full potential. And I'm not expecting them to outright steal the NFC South in 2020, though I do think that they still definitely can make the playoffs. And I have the Panthers bottoming out in the NFC South, coming in at 3-13. I love him, but I don't think that Teddy is their guy moving forward in Carolina. And I think that the team is missing a few key pieces, especially on the defense, that are definitely needed to play with the big boys. In the AFC South, I have the Jaguars bottoming out at 4-12. I'm a big believer in Gardner Minshew, don't get me wrong, and I actually do believe that he will continue to impress in 2020. I just don't think the Jaguars have the personnel to make big strides in 2020. They've lost so many players at this point, and they may just be one of the worst teams from a talent perspective in the entire league. Next up, I have the Colts clocking in at 7-9. Philip Rivers is nearing the end of his career and really looks to have fallen off. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not writing off the fact that I could be wrong about the Colts, but from my perspective right now, they just don't seem to have everything together at this point, and I don't see them going too far. Moving on down the list, I have the Texans coming in at 5-11. They've simply lost too much to put up a record similar to last year, and I mean, unless Deshaun Watson manages to manifest something absolutely insane, I don't see them vying for a playoff spot anymore. And the Titans finish atop the AFC South, coming in at 10-6. The miraculous playoff run we saw last year was only a sign of things to come out in Tennessee, I feel, and I definitely am expecting great things out of the Tennessee Titans in 2020. Heading out to the NFC West in the most competitive division in the entire league, I have the 49ers finishing with a 12-4 record. I don't see them taking any significant step back in 2020, though they will actually lose their hold over the NFC West as the team that was hot on their tail till the very end of last year, the story this year. Next up, I have the Rams bottoming out at 6-10, though I believe they would make the playoffs in almost any other division. I just don't believe in this current stage that they're better than any of the teams in their division, and as a result, I have them slotted in at 6-10. Moving on down the list, I have the Seahawks taking control of the NFC West, edging the 49ers out with a 13-3 record. Similar to last year, though, this will definitely be a very, very close race between the two teams, and it should be very, very fun to watch and see who comes out on top. But my money's going to be placed on the Seahawks this time around. And I have the Cardinals clocking in at 11-5. Kyler Murray is a special talent with incredible passing capabilities and incredible mobility to boot. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins will be a huge one, and really the only thing holding this team back is their defense. And in the AFC West, I have the Chiefs maintaining their hold over the division with a 15-1 record. I feel that this team will practically be unstoppable. Mahomes is quickly becoming the face of the NFL, and I'm not going to be surprised if they repeat in 2020. Let's be honest here. Next up, I have the Raiders bottoming out at 4-12. This team all around doesn't inspire much confidence in me, I have to say. I don't think they have much to look forward to heading into 2020, and I'm expecting a very lackluster year one in Las Vegas. Moving on down the list, I have the Chargers clocking in at 5-11. Tyrod Taylor hasn't started a game since 2018, and when he last played, he didn't look great by any means. They have a solid defense, but I believe their offense will hold them back from greatness. And to wrap this list up, I have the Broncos going 10-6 in 2020. It's very simple. I'm very high on Drew Lock as a prospect based on his limited sample size from 2020. I think he's the quarterback the Broncos have been looking for since Manning retired, and him and Jerry Jeudy will combine for a lethal passing attack. You then add on the two-headed rushing attack of Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon, and that will just make for an explosive offense with a really solid defense to boot. And that's going to just about wrap it up for today's video. But before I go, let me ask you, who do you think will win the Super Bowl in 2020?